but we're Jacksonians. No better friend, no worse enemy. Don't tread on me. So we're like a tiger. We're crouching. And you screw around with us, the Houthis. You say you're going to get a bomb and destroy our friend Israel. You go slaughter a bunch of people on October 7th. You hit installations in Syria. We're going to hit you hard. And that's the tension.
Hello and welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor is the Martin and Neely Anderson Senior Fellow in Military History and Classics at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. You can find him at his website, victorhanson.com. The name of the website is The Blade of Perseus. This is our Friday news roundup, so we're going to look at the news of the day, and we'll look at Vance making trade deals with India first, and Earth Day is today. So stay with us, and we'll get back with those stories. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. So, Victor, a lot on Vance today. He is in India currently, and apparently just breaking news today is that it looks like there is an impending trade deal going on between Vance and the Indian officials, and I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, JD Vance's wife is Indian, and it's very important that he steps up because Stephen Witkoff, the special envoy, he's got too big of a portfolio. He's got the Ukraine war, he's got outreach to Russia, he's got the Iran nuclear deal, he's got the post-October 7th wars, and he's got these trade negotiations, individuals. So we need to reestablish the primacy of Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. He's been weighing in on reforms at the State Department and also illegal immigration, but his portfolio should be the most important of these, either the Middle East war or, as I said to Jack not too long ago, or the Ukraine war. And here's what's happening. The European left and the EU in aggregate runs about a $200 billion trade surplus with us. By the way, that's one of the ways they rationalize their similar $300 billion trade deficit with China. Their attitude is, well, China's running a $1 trillion surplus. The United States is running a $1 trillion deficit. We're getting taken by the Chinese, but we'll just kind of take the Americans. And so we lose 300 to China, but we make 200 with the United States. So they're not going to cut a deal. And the pressure is mounting. They are of all of the countries and blocs in the world, they are the closest with the American left. They're similar, almost joined at the hip. So you have all of this anger among the American left and the libertarian right. I've mentioned the Wall Street Journal. Every headline is Trump apocalypto. I mean, they do not like Trump. They hate him. They can't stand him. So what's happening, the Europeans are working with the left in a way, and they don't want a trade deal. And you get the EU commissioner, you get except for Maloney maybe, and some Eastern Europeans, their attitude is, we'll just wait him out because the American left is putting so much pressure, he's going to cave. And the longer this goes on, I mean, if you lose 10%, 12% of the stock market, people start to get paranoid. So there is a time element here. Can Trump last and not crumble and get the trade deficit down, more foreign investment, get a better deal? Nobody's asking for complete parity or no, that would be nice, no tariffs. But he's trying to improve the situation, and the left does not want that to happen because they think he'll get a big political benefit from that as the midterms come. And the Europeans don't want that to happen because they're taking us to the cleaners as a way of making up for being taken by China. In a perfect world, as we said once, they should say, join with the United States. They said, you have a $300 billion, we have a $300 billion deficit with China. Let's join forces, and if we each don't trade as much with China, we can trade more with each other. But they're not doing that because they hate Trump as much as the left does. So the attention then turns to Asia. And there's about 5 to 6 players, both iconically and really in terms of GDP, that are big in trade. And that's India, we'll put China in a special category. Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, lesser the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, and then Australia. And if he can get just one big deal, and he's already said the person who gets the first big deal gets the first best deal. In other words, the first cohort that comes in gets a more lax or a more compromised trade deal. So this is very important. If JD Vance is correct, and India would fall, if I could use that term, fall the first domino, then Japan. The Japanese are saying the Americans keep raising, changing the goalposts. And then the Americans say, don't believe them. They just don't want anybody in that closed command economy. That will be the most difficult. South Korea, I think, will be more pliable because there's a national security dimension. They do not want to anger the United States when they've got a lunatic with nuclear weapons, and the only thing that's stopping him is the nuclear shield of the United States. So all they need is India or South Korea as a big economy with big trade to be more fair rather than just free trade and have parity, and then I think there'll be a rush. But the question is, can he do this before the stock market goes berserk and the left and the Europeans basically caricature him as destroying the American economy, even though the inflation rate has been good, the jobs reports have been good, the oil prices have been good, everything's been good, but they're talking themselves into a recession.
Well, since we're on India and this is a news roundup, I just want everybody to know also this week in the news is that in the India-controlled Kashmir region, there was an Islamist attack on Hindus that killed 20. So India does share a significant problem with the West, which is Islamicism as well.
And they have a troubled border with China. So does Russia. And that's one reason that Donald Trump wants to get a settlement in the Ukraine and doesn't want to be friendly as accused with Putin, but he just wants to go back to the Henry Kissinger, no better friend, no better enemy, China versus us versus Russia. And if he can, and he's trying to say to the Russians, you're underpopulated, you got this big border with China, you have a big border like India, so we're natural allies.
Well, Victor, let's turn to Earth Day then. And I brought a few things. Sorry if I have to read a little bit here. But it is Earth Day, and Earth Day was started in 1970. And today seems to have brought out all sorts of demonstrators who have done a lot of damage on the streets in New York. And they've also painted the bull on Wall Street and written on it, "Greed equals death." But I wanted to read to you since Earth Day was created in 1970, that would make it, 55 years ago. And here were some of the predictions that were coming out about problems with the climate and the environment. Kenneth Watt, an ecologist, said, we have about 5 more years at the outside to do something. And again, these are 1970s predictions. George Wald, a Harvard biologist, said civilization will end within 15 or 30 years unless immediate action is taken against problems facing mankind. Barry Commoner, Washington University biologist, we are in an environmental crisis which threatens the survival of this nation and of the world as a suitable place for human habitation. And lastly, the New York Times editorial said on the first Earth Day, man must stop pollution and conserve his resources, not merely to enhance existence, but to save the race from intolerable deterioration and possible extinction. So those were some predictions made 55 years ago, and I was wondering your thoughts on it.
That reminds me of the bet with the British economist and businessman who bet Paul Ehrlich about the price of commodities, see what would happen and after a number of years, and he was right and Ehrlich was wrong. When you raise this argument to the left, they say, well, we had to be extremist and alarmist. Now we're recycling plastic. We have electric battery cars. It was only due to us and that extremism. And that doesn't fly. I can remember it very well. I was a junior in high school, 1970, and our student council heard about Earth Day. And it was, as I remember, we got kind of a they didn't have facts, but it was like a communication that all the high schools should participate in this new ecological. And it was Senator Gaylord Nelson, and the thing I remember about the co-founder was Ira Einhorn, and he would brag that his name was Unicorn in German, but the point is he was a murderer, and he killed his wife, and I think he's still alive and he's still in prison. But my point is this, that there was all this alarmist, so we at Little Selma Rural High School decided you didn't know what to do, and somebody suggested, well, go out to the evil body and fender and mechanic shop. So we went out there, and there was the teacher there, and he said, I don't know what the hell, excuse me, you guys are doing, but I got an old straight 8, and we've worked on it. I want to get rid of it, and I don't want to take it to the dump, so why don't you guys dig a big hole and ceremoniously bury my engine? So we thought, wow, this is a good idea. So he was kind of using us because he did his post. So it's still there in Selma. I don't think anybody knows it. 55 years later, we dug down 12 feet, and we did it all day, and we finished at 7 o'clock. And we had it all dug we had to put tarps over the dirt. The principal came out so nobody would fall in. We had to put sawhorses around. And then at 11 the next morning, the whole 800 students would come out. We'd have an assembly. And then this guy was coming up with the engine was there, and he was going to get a crane and drop it in from the truck, a little tow truck. And we were all going to clap that we had declared the death of the internal combustion engine. So we went home. I was really tired. My parents go, what have you been doing? I said, we've been digging a big hole 12 feet deep into hardpan. And he said, why? I told him, he said, this is ridiculous. I said, it's all done now. The dirt's there. All we have to do is go tomorrow, and that's loose dirt. So I get a call at 4:30 in the morning from one of the organizers. He said, Victor, get up. My dad got, you don't answer your own phone. We have one party line. And so my dad goes, some guy wants you to get up and go to Selma High School. Don't ask me. So a local group of people from another high school supposedly had heard about it and snuck in that night and filled up the entire hole with all the dirt. So I got there at 5 in the morning, and we dug for like 5 hours. We had baskets with ropes on them, and we got it all out just in time. We were all dirty, and then we dropped the engine in, and we all clapped and said, this is 50 years before the advent of Elon Musk. But it was kind of what I'm getting at. It was all ceremonial. It was all kind of the Vietnam era was still going. The war was going on. We hadn't got quite Vietnamization. There was hippie movement. We were always about 5 years behind the coast. So the Summer of Love, 68, that came to Selma around 1971. So, and we always got the downside of the hippie movement. They got the flowers and the hippie. We got the hard drugs. I don't know how many people
weird, huh?
died. I must have had 5 or 6 people in my class or the class ahead of me died of overdoses. I have never been to a dermatologist, and in my life, and I went today, and they had a little, how they take a little biopsy or something of a little growth, but in 2014, I had a catastrophic bike accident. The carbon fork broke. My fault. I'd had a minor accident, and I had a hairline invisible crack in the carbon. I fell over, head over the handlebars. My teeth went through my lips, separated them. I knocked out all 4 teeth, and my head I got knocked out the pavement. Long story short, I got 150 stitches. This is on my face, all around here. They sewed my lips. Anyway, so I go there today. And when I was in the emergency room, I won't mention too many details about the ER surgeon, but she was talking on a phone while she was doing this on speaker with her mother. And anyway, there were some big gaps here. Just whole chunks of skin were torn out, and my lips one side was here and here. And so she was sewing my lips together and everything. And she didn't really make a tight fit. And I had to lead 100 people to Europe in 8 days and I was knocked out, and they told me not to fly with a concussion and everything. So anyway, long story short, I just had her do this, and I didn't go to have it followed up. Later I did, and he said it was too late to redo it, although he said he'd do a plastic surgery and say it was an emergency fix job. I could get a good... But anyway, my point was that here, they didn't close. So they have this blue scar tissue. Here on the nose, black, blue, and then I had embedded asphalt. She didn't get all the parts out, so both sides. So anyways, he's looking at this, and he says today, there's a blue phenomenon in your skin. And then I guess there is some type of weird, I don't know, cancerous or weird skin condition that has an off-color bluish tinge. So he was saying could be disturbing unless you had an accident. And I said, I not only had an accident, I had a rush job to fix the stitches, 150 stitches. And then he started looking at it and said, oh my God. So that was my first appointment with, and there was a wonderful plastic surgeon in Visalia, California. And after I came, he redid it when I got back from the trip. And he said, if you just had not gone on your trip, and by the way, everybody, if you get a concussion and they tell you not to fly, listen to them. I was fine when we had a very compressed, a new 777 with good, and I didn't get headaches. And then I went on a regional jet. And my gosh, for the next 10 days, I thought I don't know what I thought I was.
Okay, Victor. So let's turn.
About your skincare.
Yeah. So let's turn, and we're still on Vance since we started with Vance's first segment. And Andy McCarthy wrote a searing critique of Vance, and I don't know if our listeners out there feel this way too, but I can't quite make sense of this deporting to El Salvador Abrego Garcia. So I'm going to tell you the 4 things I picked out that I could tell that Andy McCarthy was trying to say Vance did wrong or the Trump administration did wrong. So first off, he said the administration illegally deported Abrego Garcia, and it's responsible for his being detained in El Salvador, that they violated an earlier judge's decision to withhold removal to El Salvador. I think that's why all these news people are saying, well, they could have deported him to any other country, just not El Salvador. And then finally, Trump did not comply with SCOTUS, and this is a display that he has unchecked power, according to Andy McCarthy.
Well, Andy should recall what Joe Biden said when the Supreme Court said that the cancellation right before the midterm elections of student debt was unconstitutional. And remember what Joe Biden said? Well, they wouldn't let me do it. I got a way around it. I went around it. And then we should remember Chuck Schumer at head of a wild abortion mob at the doors of the Supreme Court. Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, you sowed the wind, you're going to reap the will. You're not going to know what's going to hit you. And then people swarmed the justice's house, including an assassin who wanted to kill Gorsuch, but called his sister and she talked him out of it. And then in addition to that, they wanted to pack the court. So there's been a war, and I know Andy McCarthy and like him, but I think the emphasis, if you ask yourself, who is waging war against the legals, the left has. They were the ones that went after the court. They were the ones who tried to take Trump off the ballot. And all of those 4 indictments, those 4 local, state, federal prosecutors, every single one is facing real problems. Fani Willis was taken off the case for the Nathan Wade unethical. She's under investigation. She was by the Georgia state legislature. A committee is investigating her for unethical and maybe illegal conduct. She was just fined over $50,000 for refusing to turn over documents. That whole thing is just a collapse because she is facing probably charges. And then Jack Smith got $140,000 in free legal fees. He never reported. He was the federal prosecutor. Then we go to Letitia James, who said that Donald Trump had fraudulently conspired to fill out a real estate form, and now we find out that's exactly what she did. She said she was married to her father, said she lived out of state as her primary residence, and then she lied about her kind of apartment units. She did everything that she accused of Donald Trump. So my point is that they have systematically abused the legal system, the left. So Andy is now mad at Donald Trump, but he doesn't quite get the political nature. And this is what a Harvard-Harris poll just showed. 75% of Americans want illegal aliens who have committed crimes or are involved in criminal activity to be deported. And their way of thinking goes like this, Andy. Joe Biden broke the law. Alejandro Mayorkas was impeached for breaking the law. A federal law says you cannot cross the border of the United States when you please and illegally enter. You can visit the United States if you have a passport and you're from a country that does not, require visas. We don't require that country. Or you can come through at San Diego or other legal points and visit. You cannot just walk across. You can't do that with any country. Somewhere between 8 and 12 million people did that. Now, Andy says that JD Vance was exaggerating with 20 million. I think JD was talking about the 20 million. He got confused. There was 20 million here already. And Andy says 10, no, 10, and now there's 20. No, there was 20 here. Yale studies showed that years ago. So now we have probably 30 million. But the point is, most people, as the polls show, said, well, wait a minute. None of you people who are suing on the left were bothered that they had destroyed the law. In other words, you allowed illegal aliens to come across and you didn't enforce the law. You were subversive. You were insurrectionary. Same thing with sanctuary cities. They break the law. And so in the American mind, the collective American mind, it goes something like this, Andy. It goes like this. Somebody comes across illegally without permission. Then he resides illegally. He has abused our legal system. He has stuck his nose up. We don't like you. We don't even want to get near you. When we get a court hearing and they pick it, we don't go. And then all of a sudden when he's deported, as he should never have been let in, then all of a sudden we have to give the legal system to him, as if the Constitution is a suicide pact. The other thing is that Andy made the point that he was with gang members at Home Depot. They had drugs and money. There were informants that said he was. There were 2 prior justices. He made the point they weren't justices, they were arbitrators, immigrant. Yeah. So, and they said that there was good reason, given that he had a nickname, a gang nickname. He had gang insignia, tattoos. They thought it was good enough to deport him. And then another judge on appeal held that he shouldn't be deported to El Salvador because he might be in danger. Didn't say he couldn't be deported. And then there was a traffic incident where a Tennessee patrolman pulled him over. He had 7 people all registered at the same house. They wouldn't give accurate information. He had a suspended driver's license. He was breaking the law. He should have been deported right then. They called him, wanted to deport him. The FBI wouldn't let him do it. They asked the FBI if they would indict them for trafficking, or they didn't want to do that. And then, of course, the piece de resistance was his girlfriend. And he beat her. He tore her clothes off. He hit her. And so the American people say, Andy, we let in by mistake a spousal abuser who hits women and beats them up and hit her in the eye, and was probably trafficking and was known to, among most people, as a gang member. And you're asking, well, was he ever indicted and convicted and sentenced? And the answer is no. He's right about that. But the answer the American people would say is, I don't care. He's a guest to my house. If somebody comes in to my house and breaks windows, I don't have to evict him pending a policeman to come here, investigate, and say, Victor, there's good evidence that he broke your windows, and we're going to arrest him. And then I wait while he's in my house. And then he's convicted a year later. And then I say, now you have to leave. No, I just kick him out. I didn't invite him. That's the thinking. That's the thinking behind what that's why 80%, almost 75% of the American people want him gone. The other issue is he's not a Maryland man. He is an El Salvador citizen. Was in El Salvador, and he fled because of gang affiliation. It's controversial whether he was just an innocent person who never tattooed himself. He never had gang insignia originally, but he was driven out by gangs who were threatening his family, or he was in a gang, and that was a gang. Anyway, he left, and then he was deported. Now he's back. So he's a citizen of El Salvador. So you have this Orwellian situation where you have all these democratic grandees, as if they're 19th century Yankee imperialists, traipsing down to a Latin American country and then taking it over, kind of just going in there and saying to the president, hey, your citizen, we want him. It's almost like you've got to deport your citizen because we want him. And we don't want him to put him in jail. We want him for political purposes because we're running a campaign against Donald Trump. So he's very valuable to us. And then they don't get the final thing about this is why would he wear a short sleeve shirt at this margarita party with Senator Van Hollen? Why wouldn't you cover up all those tattoos? Did you see them? They were all visible. So he's there and he's having, I don't know whether it was a setup or they ordered margaritas and then they had thought better of it, or the waiter didn't like them and just put them there for props. But it was really bad. And then it just resonated. What is it with you people? Why do you ignore the people in the Rio Grande Valley and in New York City that have been victimized, whether financially or shortage, a dearth of social services by illegal aliens? Why do you always get excited about a criminal? He is a criminal. He's been engaged, and you make him the cause celeb, and then he's a referendum on lawfare. Not Fannie Willis, not trying to get Trump off the ballot, not what Chuck Schumer said about the court. Donald Trump is the threat because he deported somebody. Probably mistakenly. They didn't know. They just looked at him and they saw the gang insignia and they looked at his prior record and they didn't see that there had been a hold on him not to go to El Salvador. What I think they should do is say, okay, bring him back for a day or two and redeport and then send him back. But El Salvador has a say in it. It's their citizen. We don't have people from Germany telling us. We don't go over to Germany and say, we had a German guy living in the United States. You got to make him come back here because he wanted to. And Germany says, no, we think he's a gang member and we want to put him in jail. And we say, well, we didn't convict him. And Germany says, I don't care. He's a German citizen and he's on German soil and we're going to investigate him. Well, no, we're the United States. We found out that he had criminal behaviors, but we didn't indict him, so you give him back to us. And they say, Germany says, well, wait a minute, he's not even got a green card. He didn't even apply for citizenship. He's a German citizen, and you're coming on our soil and telling us what I have to do to a German that I don't like, one of my own people, because I think he's a gang member? That's what it's colonialism. I don't know how the left gets itself into these situations where they come across so illiberal. That this is a losing issue from them. And there's already been a commercial cut by the RNC or New York Post where come to El Salvador and see, and
so
they have all
cool.
these pictures of democratic people. Come to beautiful ganglands, wonderful prisons. It's just, you'll love it in El Salvador. So I don't know what I understand. Andy's the law that the final verdict was he should not be until it was firmly established that he was a known, proven, certified gang member, etc., and had violated this. And then, but they'd done that so much due process. But he was looking at the ultimate, not the penultimate or the earlier rulings. And
Senator Kennedy made that point in saying that when they were talking, because it's all about due process, and Andy also talks about that, but Senator Kennedy said not only has he had due process, meaning all the courts that he's been in so far, but it's probably cost the American taxpayer like $5 million. I don't know what his figure was.
and think
but-
about the other thing. How many engineers from India, from Taiwan, from Indonesia, from Belgium, PhDs, MAs, all these people, MDs from Ukraine, all these people want to come in here and they are applying legally, and they've never committed a crime. They've never been near a gang. They're self-supporting. They have real assets, and they want to come to the United States, and we won't process them. And this guy just cuts in front of the line, and then he abuses our hospitality by beating up a woman and trafficking, and with gang affiliations with a gang that's a terrorist, the State Department terrorist designated group. And so I understand the law, but I also understand the left doesn't. I would say to Andy, when you write this article, why don't you write one right next to it? I don't have a problem with him if he wants to write that JD Vance I thought it was too ad hominem, that he was a demagogue and all of this. But why don't you write an article right next to it and say the abuse of the law Andy was a federal prosecutor, so he could say that Robert Hur had one set of laws that Jack Smith did not follow. Robert Hur found that Joe Biden, in I think 4 unsecured locations going back at least 30 years, had classified documents. He also found out that Joe Biden never willingly offered to come forward and point that out to federal investigators. He only did so when he had appointed a special counsel. And then when somebody went to him and said, if you appointed a special counsel to go after Donald Trump for improperly taking out documents, do you think you ever did it? Because somebody will find out. Oh, yeah, I'll come forward, but I'll volunteer it, so it'll be different. And then third, after he went through all of this, he found out that it was illegal. And then, unlike Donald Trump, I mean, they had said Donald Trump was crazy. Remember that? That he had to he took the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. That was what, and Rod Rosenstein was going to wear a wire with Andrew McCabe and find him, crazy. So if they thought Joe Biden was crazy or demented, and that therefore he was not criminally liable, maybe they could have said that about Trump. Maybe Jack Smith could say he's kind of wild. I don't think he knew what he was doing, because I have to say that because they just said it with Joe Biden and no prosecutor is supposed to be a psychiatrist. He's supposed to take the case to the jury or the grand jury or whatever. You don't do I have 21%? I understand they have to get a case they think they can win, but they could have won this case. But he's psychoanalyzing that people would see Joe and they'd see he's enfeebled. He's a tired old man with a bad memory, and they'd be sympathetic. And then the final proverbial cherry was that the ghostwriter who was writing the memoirs was given classified information by Joe Biden, kind of spice up the memoir, make it saleability. And then he got panicked when Joe went forward, so he destroyed them. And then Robert Hur said, I want those tapes, because they will show that you were discussing without a security clearance, which is a felony, classified information, knowingly so. Oh, I destroyed them. Okay, you destroyed federal evidence? You can imagine if Donald Trump destroyed a bunch of them, he'd be in jail. So then they said, well, why did you destroy them? Hur said, well, I was afraid that I was doing it for the good of the country. I was afraid somebody might hack the information. So it was so contorted, and there was such an abuse of the law, and there was so asymmetrical treatment of two a president and an ex-president, given what Smith was on his vendetta and twisting the law, and Robert Hur was twisting the law or under pressure to twist it. That compared to this guy, you could write a whole book on that. And you could write a whole book on the 25 states that tried to get him off the ballot. And you could write a whole book on Alvin Bragg and Fannie Willis and Jack Smith and Latita James and E. Jean Carroll.
Apparently, there are several whole books coming out about Joe Biden, or with the information about Joe Biden.
So my point is that it's not a cause celeb. It's not a hill to die on. This guy is a thug. And yes, let's follow the niceties so we respect the law. And let's not say, like Joe Biden did, I got around the court and bragged about it. But it's something that is a losing situation because, it's Luigi Mangione, it's Carmelo Anthony, it's Mahmoud Khalil. They have a fixation on people who are unsavory. One kid is alleged, just got angry and pulled out a knife and stuck it in somebody. And why was he carrying a knife at 17? Stuck it in the chest of somebody, then took off and ran. The next person was the point person for Divest, a violent group of students that took over halls at Columbia, disrupted classes, shouted and praised October 7th. Why do we want that guy here? And then, of course, the assassin, he was an assassin who killed him. And they're all the people the left has canonized in one way or another. And I don't understand it. Why don't they worry about the people who are the victims of all these people?
Yeah, well, it seems to me that they're going to be losing most of their constituency unless they somehow manage to turn it around from these extremists. But let's go ahead and take a break, Victor, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about the Department of Defense and Pete Hegseth. Stay with us, and we'll be right back. I would like to take a moment to welcome a new sponsor, Vibrance. The ingredients in Vibrance Super C Serum can replace your day creams, night creams, wrinkle creams, neck creams, and even dark spot reducers. Made in USA of the highest quality ingredients, including vitamin C, hyaluronic acid, vitamin B5, and vitamin E, Super C Serum delivers noticeable results. Simplify your skincare routine. Get a healthier complexion and minimize wrinkles and age spots with Vibrance. And if you don't find it better than your current skincare routine, you'll get a full refund. Go to Vibrance.com/Victor and save up to 37% and free shipping. That's Vibrance, Vibrance, Vibrance.com/Victor. I used it for the first time the other day, and it made my skin immediately feel softer and moister. What a difference. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor is on X. His handle is at VD Hanson. He's also on Facebook at Hanson's Morning Cuff. And like I said, you can come join his website, victorhanson.com. The name of it is The Blade of Perseus, and you can join it for $65 a year or just try it out for $6.50 a month. So Pete Hegseth is busy dismantling DEI in the military, looking for or expecting accountability for Afghanistan, rebuilding our defenses, and he's got morale up as it hasn't been in many years. And yet in the Senate, Tim Kaine is criticizing him for having poor judgment professionally and personally, and for gaffes that he's making. And he feels like this is justified critique of Pete Hegseth, or I hope I didn't get it wrong.
I'm not saying whatabouts, but did Tim Kaine say anything when the former chief of defense went AWOL for 7 days and never told anybody he was in serious health and tried to cover it up? Did Tim Kaine ever say, let me just put it all in perspective, is firing 2 or 3 of your top aides a cause for dismissal, or overseeing the entire collapse of the American project in Afghanistan, the murder, killing of 13 Marines, the surrender of $1 billion embassy, a $300 million retrofitted Bagram Air Force Base, and the entire $50 billion munitions stash from planes, and that they're all in terrorist hands now in the international terrorist market. That's what Lloyd Austin did. I didn't hear anything from Tim Kaine. So why is he firing people? Because they're, and I wrote about it in the New Criterion about the paradoxes of the MAGA movement. The MAGA movement, in theory, says we are Jacksonian. Some of the MAGA people interpret that as neo-isolationist. The Middle East isn't worth it. It's not worth the bones of one, to paraphrase Bismarck, one American Marine to go over there. They're all hopeless. Let's just keep out, build our Fortress America. And the other is, well, we don't go nation building after the disasters, but we're Jacksonians. No better friend, no worse enemy, don't tread on me. So we're like a tiger. We're crouching. And you screw around with us, the Houthis, You say you're going to get a bomb and destroy our friend Israel. You go slaughter a bunch of people on October 7th. You hit installations in Syria. We're going to hit you hard. And that's the tension. So he's got the MAGA people telling Pete Hegseth, are you with, we want to know, are you with JD Vance? Or are you with Waltz and the interventionist? Or are you neutral, like Marco Rubio? And when you had that leaked conversation, he went back and forth. It kind of ended up more with the JD Vance people, but he's also a Jacksonian. So the people who want him to be Jacksonian and retaliate, or have a big presence around the world and don't take crap from anybody and restore deterrence, they're leaking about the MAGA people. And the MAGA people are saying these are war hawks. And some of them have gone to Tucker Carlson and said, I think two of the three were MAGA people. And I think one of them may have been a counter casualty who was a hawk. But they're going to people like Tucker and everything and saying the war people want to go. And when I define hawks versus neo-isolationists, the issue that everybody's discussing in the Defense Department, as in the State Department, is whether to preemptively take out the nuclear program in Iran. So there's people in the Defense Department, as well as the State Department. They're going to Hegseth and they're saying, look, no one has ever trusted the Iranians. They are pathological liars. They are in the most vulnerable position in their entire history. Their air defenses are a shambles. The Houthis are emasculated. Hamas is almost non-existent. The formidable Hezbollah, they're in disarray. Their client in Syria, Assad, is kaput. If you're ever going to stop them from the bomb, given their lying and duplicity, and look at the Obama deal, it was completely crafted to let them have a bomb in 10 years. Now is the time. You can join the Israelis and you can go in there and bomb it and get commandos and just wipe it out. And that might cause internal revolution. And then there is the other side and said, first of all, it's none of our business to go in there and interfere. And if they say that they're going to get rid of the bomb, they're probably lying, but we can deal with it when they get a bomb. And that's Israel's problem, not ours. That's the tension. So each side are leaking to make the other side look like they're ridiculous. And he's new. He's only been there 90 days. So he's got to decide where his president is. And Donald Trump is in both camps.
Donald Trump is always in both camps, huh?
Yeah, he is. He is.
Yeah, he's in whatever camp.
Tulsi Gabbard will go say, we don't want endless forever wars. And he'll say, I'm not, they're bad deals, Tulsi. You spend too much money. That was a disaster in Iraq. It was a disaster in Afghanistan. And then the next day, somebody like Waltz will go say, the Houthis are laughing at us. They've taken over the Red Sea. We can't put a ship. This little two-bed outfit of thugs and terrorists is trying to attack. And Trump said, did they attack an American ship? Go bomb them. And you have to reconcile those two positions.
Well, let's turn to another senator and left-wing individual who's often in the news, and she's in the news a lot this week, Elizabeth Warren. Apparently, the agency she helped to create, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, has been regulating Native American financial institutions, and the Native Americans are very angry at our Pocahontas. And then the second thing is she's angry at Trump for collecting on student loans. And so I was wondering
I thought she believed everybody's talking about the rule of law. They're talking about poor Mr. Garcia. We must honor the rule of law to the letter. Well, the letter says if you take out a loan and it's guaranteed by the federal government and you non-payment, it's about 13 or 14% of all the federal loans. And the whole loan portfolio is up to $1.7 trillion. And so a lot of people are just paying interest with no principal, but 10 or 12% just said, forget it. They'll never do anything to me, because Biden started giving rolling amnesties, which were illegal. He can't just, by an arbitrary fiat, cancel a federal contract. But that's what he did. And so she's really basically saying, what is she saying? She's saying, well, we have a $2 trillion deficit. We're $37 trillion. What's another trillion? Let's just give it to them, and then they'll be happy, and I can run on, I'll run for senator saying, Elizabeth Warren gave you free stuff, and you got it with it. But if you look at the dynamics of it, the bulk of the loans are not Joe working class student who took out 25, 30,000 and can't pay it back. There's a lot of those, but it's mostly people in medical school, law school, business school, education professionals who have good incomes now, and they just are sitting on 30, 40, 50, $100,000 of loan, and they don't want to pay it back, and some of them have the ability to do it. So I think, and then the other subtext is Donald Trump hates the Ivy League, and he hates snooty higher education. He's basically saying to all these people, you're just an indoctrination factory. All you do is teach hatred, and you're biased, and you defy the Supreme Court on affirmative action, and you're woke, and you have segregated graduations. You have these big endowments. You just guarantee the loan. These guys are so great, and you think they'll pay it back? Harvard, just say $5 billion of our endowment is now dedicated to guaranteeing our student loans. So they can borrow the money from banks, and instead of the federal government, Harvard will guarantee it. And then you know what will happen? They will graduate in 4 years, and Harvard will steer them to a lucrative major that will be a lucrative lifetime career, and Harvard will get them. They'll go after them. Unlike the federal government, Harvard will go after them. And so that's what Trump is saying.
Even more so than Trump is, by expecting
so funny
repayment.
About just one last afterthought about Elizabeth Warren. She wrote a book. I actually looked at it about how to flip houses and make money. And then she wrote also a cookbook, her Indian Native American recipes, many of which she lifted and stole from other people. And then she's in the Harvard directory as the first Native American law professor. She came from, I don't know, was it Baylor, University of Texas, or somewhere in Texas. But my point is this. It's demonstrably true that her whole career changed when she was hired as a Harvard law professor. That put her in the nexus of the Boston to Washington power corridor. Had she not got that job at Harvard Law School, we would never be talking about her right now. That launched her career. But my point is this, that career was launched on a fraud. It was launched on the idea that she said she was a Native American. And they liked that because they couldn't find any Native American law professors. So here was this blonde, kind of attractive woman in her 50s. Oh, wow. She's Native American. She's got high cheekbones. It was all a fraud. And if you follow the fraud, then her Harvard law professor was a fraud. Her senatorship was a fraud. All of it was a fraud. Nobody would ever dare say that until Donald Trump came by and he just said one magic word, Pocahontas. And it was a word that he picked because it deliberately irritated the political correctness because they hate Pocahontas. She's a Native American sellout by having a romance with a white colonialist. So, oh my God, he's still bringing up Pocahontas. And he said, and then he said, just take a DNA test. And why did she do it? She did it, and it was like 0.1 or something.
She should have stuck with the high cheekbone story.
I think my 3 children have more Native American. I asked them. They did. They did that. They had more Native American heritage than she did.
So, Victor, since you started in on the universities, there was an Atlantic article that was titled, and I read through it, "The Worst Job in America. Who would want to be president of an Ivy League school?" And they said no matter what these presidents do, they will get pilloried. And they used as their example Columbia, who is being forced by the administration to follow the law, and they're slow walking it. And then their other example is Harvard, who has refused to cooperate with the government.
Who would want to make $1 million and be given a lifetime exemption from plagiarism? Where's Claudine Gay today? She was president. She had every perk. I think she was probably, with her portfolio and her salary, over $2 million. And then she was fired and that's so terrible. It was so hard on her. And then she went into political science, and people said she's a plagiarist. Her whole career is based on plagiarism. And they said she was Harvard president. End of story. That's not such a bad life. There's somebody listening to me right now who is on a D9 all day long, and he's making $22 an hour in the snow working, right, in the Midwest. And you say to him, it would be a terrible job to be president of Harvard. You only make $1 million. So this is insane. And if it's such a terrible job, I think in my career at different universities as visiting professors, Cal State, U.S. Naval Academy, Pepperdine, I would say that I have met 50 faculty members who wanted to be deans, 30 deans that wanted to be vice provost, 20 vice provosts that wanted to be provost, 10 provosts that wanted to be president, and 5 presidents that wanted to be chancellors. So if it's so bad, why do they all want to do it? And they all want to do it because they love the big, beautiful university residence. They love the salary. And they don't really want to make change. The only president I ever knew that shook up things and really did things was Max Nikias at USC. And he worked like crazy. And that's one of the reasons they got angry at him, because he was. But the point is, don't feel sorry for these Ivy League presidents at all. They're running something that is so disingenuous. And as I said before, it's a mossy rock, and you turn over the rock, it looks nice on the surface, and then there's crawling animals underneath. And they are segregationists. They have everything segregated by race, dorms, safe spaces, graduation. Oh, no, Victor, they're auxiliary. They're by choice. Then you go to those things. I used to go to some of them, and they're all one race. And the dorms, oh, this is the theme house. There's no white guy in the black theme house. There's no black guy in the La Raza theme house, unless he's from Latin America. And the weirdest thing is, it's if somebody said, there's 20 or 30% white guys at the Ivy League, they're going to have a European something, and I think that would be insane. They would go ballistic. The whole thing is a fraud. And then they're having remedial courses because they got into George Floyd panic and they thought they were going to we were the first to get rid of the SAT. Well, we were the second to. No, you were the third to get rid of comparative adjudication of high school GPAs. We dropped all that. So if you got a 4.0 at Selma High School, that was the same thing as prep school 4.0. That's what they were doing, and everybody's going to learn about it. They're going to learn about the student loans. They're going to learn about the biased faculties. They're going to learn about the segregated spaces. They're going to learn that if there's about 3 things at a university. If somebody comes up anonymously and says, Victor was a sexual harasser, or Victor said a hate speech word, they're going to call me before a forum. They're going to tell me no counsel. And I'm going to say, who said that? Can I relate you a story? It's very relevant. Okay.
Go ahead.
So I was at a university that'll be unnamed. And I had a colleague who was up for tenure. I won't mention her. And I was going to vote for her tenure. But I didn't think she was an impressive candidate, but I thought given who is tenured, she met that lowest bar. She filed a complaint against me because she said she was walking down an outside corridor, and we had heavy steel doors at that place I taught, heavy steel doors outside. There was no interior hallway, and it was loud with students. And she said for some reason she put her ear to the door, and I had to share. And she said that she heard a colleague say to Victor that wasn't that person very unattractive? And I said something to the effect that she was. I've never mentioned, of course. This was all made up. So she went and reported me for sexual insult. Imagine that, walking down a corridor, and saying it was very noisy. And some administrator never. So I went in, and the vice provost for personnel said, "This is very serious, Professor Hanson. I know you think you're a hotshot with publishing books at this place, but we've got a I said, what is the complaint? The complaint was that you said something that was derogatory about a colleague and it was off color. I said, well, who is the person? I can't tell you. I have to protect her constitutional anonymity. And I said, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. And I said, well, how did what? Well, apparently you and your office mate were talking in the interior. So I said, apparently we talk sometimes in our office when and he said, yes, and somebody was walking by, and I said, well, who is it? Is that the person that's the complainer? I can't give that information. And so, but it was of a derogatory sexual nature. It was something that she was so unattractive that nobody would want to something. I can't even think of it. And I said, so how did she hear, though? Because it was out in the middle of the public. Well, she knew that you might be involved in her tenure decision, so she put her ear. So I said, so she was eavesdropping through a steel door outside, and she claims she heard this. But I don't even know who it is. I knew who it was, because he gave it away. But then my point is, I said, and you're going to investigate me. So you know what I said?
I bet you gave him example using him.
Yes. I said, dear Vice President X, I am going to see the provost, whom I knew and liked. And I'm going to tell him the following. What are you going to tell her? And I said, I am going to tell her that I was in a bathroom stall in the administration building. And I heard some commotion in the next stall. And I didn't know what was going on. So I got out of my stall and went over to the next stall and put my ear next to it. And I think I recognized your voice. And I think there was something going on with you there. And he said, that's not true. I said, I don't know. And I'm going to go make a complaint. But I'm going to say one thing. I do not want to be identified. But I'm going to say that Vice Provost X was in a bathroom stall talking about sexual things with somebody in that stall. And I just happened to hear it, so I put my ear against it. And I don't want to be identified. But I want action against it. So he looks at me. Well, that's not true. I said, exactly. So then he said, I'm a provost. I said, vice provost. And so I go and I said, I will guarantee you. And I was serious. And I said, it's a 10-minute walk back to my office. When I get back to my office, I'm calling the provost to lodge this complaint. So that would be a lie. That would ruin you. I said, I don't care. I'm a farmer. I don't get it. So I get back, and there's my little phone. We had new phones. We used to have tape, cartridge tape for phone calls you missed, recording, and it was blinking. We had these new Sony phones. It was blinking 3 times. And the first one was, you're gonna be in big trouble. The second one was, I don't think this is wise. And the third one was, please don't do this. We've dropped all charges. We've dropped all investigations against you. And that's the kind of people that academia has. And I know that a lot of you think I'm crazy, but my point is, for 50 years in academia as a graduate student, a graduate TA, teaching in graduate school, being a professor in the Cal State system, being a visitor at about 4 different colleges, and being at Stanford University, I can tell you my respect for academics is very low. And so I don't have any empathy for somebody who says, in the Atlantic, of all places, the Lisa Jobs, that we have to have empathy because these poor presidents who have allowed anti-Semitism. So they are now starting to act a little bit. Harvard is. They're worried that they have a joint program with Bezir University in Palestine, which was a hate fest. They have a campus, I shouldn't say a campus, but a reciprocal agreement with a university, and now they may drop it. So my point is, why are they doing all these things now? Why didn't they do it before? Why did Donald Trump have to galvanize? It's called money, money, money. They don't listen to anybody. They go up there and lie and say, oh, well, we're doing all. They don't do anything. They disrupt classes. They don't do anything. They just, yesterday, Columbia had said to Donald Trump, we're going to punish disruptive students that are pro-Hamas. And they just chained themselves to the gate. And they said, this is in violation of Columbia's statutes, especially our newly enforced ones. And then they called the police and they unbolted them and they said, see you, go away. But there was never anything. They just committed a felony by locking themselves to a gate illegally, and they're going to be expelled. So it's not a hard job. It really isn't. I mean, it's a hard job, but it's not a hard job like Juan, the guy that put my roof on, and Victor, look at this, and he's got 40 pounds of Prudential shingles on his shoulder as he's tiptoeing 30 feet above the ground on the crest of a 2-story Victorian house that's 150 years old with that weight on it. I mean, that is courageous and that is hard. Or some of the people, it's not like Juan and Armando that were up in the attic at 120 degrees rewiring the house in July. You know what I mean? The poor guys that were taking all the insulation out of this house, and I went up there with them with a mask, and there was some illegal glass insulation, there was dead mice, there was a dead owl, there was a dead cat, and they were out there, and it was 140, and I was bringing them water. That is a hard job, and I tipped them. I tried to give them as much money so that, but my point is, people listening have empathy for people like that. They don't have empathy for people who go before Congress and make $1 million and lie to their teeth. They don't. And I wish people would keep that perspective in academia. They are the most blessed. It's a hard job to teach and correct papers and everything, but you look at how many hours you're actually in the classroom, and summers. It's not driving a truck down the 99 every single day for 12 hours.
Well, that was my impression with that Atlantic article. I thought, wow, this is just telling us the caliber and the character of the people they have to choose from if they can't find anybody to run the place.
Every once in a while, they find somebody.
That's really good. Well, Max.
John Silber at Boston. He just fired people, Max Nikias at USC. And then what do? They try to get you can't be that. You're not supposed to be forceful, direct, and honest. Yeah. You're supposed to be double dealing and talk out of both sides of your mouth and contextualize. On the one hand, this is very important, and we'll form a committee, but let's not rush to judgment. I have to hear 3 sides of every argument. As that's what they want.
Victor, let's go ahead and take a break and then come back and talk a little bit about some of the Democratic senators. And one of them is Senator Warnock. So stay with us and we'll be right back.
Listen, Americans are fed up with Big Pharma controlling health care, raising prices, restricting access, and making it harder to get the medications they need. That's why more people are turning to All Family Pharmacy. You've probably heard of them. They're a family-owned pharmacy in Florida that does things differently. They put you first, giving you the freedom to order what you need, when you need it, so you're never without essential medications. From ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine to antibiotics, daily maintenance meds, and emergency kits, they make sure you have access to the treatments you need without restrictions. They know how important it is to stay prepared, which is why they make it easy to stock up and order treatments in bulk. It's simple. Just order online and they ship your meds to your door. You don't even need your doctor involved. They work directly with licensed doctors to get you the prescriptions you need. Visit their website today and get 10% off your order. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Victor and use the code Victor10. Again, that's allfamilypharmacy.com/Victor and use the code Victor10, that's Victor10, to get 10% off your order today.
Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor is now on YouTube and Rumble and actually Spotify. Our Spotify crowd is not all that large, so if you are a Spotify user, go to, I think I called it the Victor Davis Hanson Podcast Show. No, the Victor Davis Hanson podcast on Spotify. I had to give it
Wait,
a whole different name.
you don't even know my title?
No, I don't. There's other people that have, well, legitimately, John Solomon's group has the audio for that. So, anyway, back to the Senator Warnock apparently has been caught or has been recently revealed that he is living in a $1 million home rent free, and it is provided by his church. And that is impropriety, since you shouldn't be, that's a gift.
It's a gift. All he has to do is report it
Yeah.
and see if there's IRS implications for exceeding the gift tax. But I suggested he call a lawyer. I have a recommendation. He could call Latita James. She could give him advice about, I don't know, real estate fraud and housing fraud and non-disclosure, and advise him of all the penalties that he might incur as a senator. Be a good idea.
Speaking of that, actually, did you see that Carmelo lawyer come out and he said that there was a rainy day and the school should have canceled the track meet, and that this whole thing would not have occurred because
lightning could have hit somebody and it wouldn't have occurred either. It wouldn't have, all it would have to occur was there was about 5 steps that he could have taken. Step number 1, he didn't have to go to school to the track meet with a concealed weapon. Number 2, he didn't have to go onto the wrong side of the field. Anybody who goes to high school games, junior high games, JC, no, if you go and sit on the other side and yell and make it known that you're not one, that's stupid. Number 3, when he was told to stop, right, he could have stopped. He could have said, yes, I'll be quiet, I'm on the wrong side, and left. Number 4, he didn't have to take out his knife. He could have had a fist fight. He could have pushed. Number 5, if he did take out his knife, and if he was foolish enough to use it, he could have, I don't know, stabbed him in the arm, stabbed him in the leg. He stabbed him in the heart. He tried to kill him deliberately. He's a murderer if these allegations prove true. But what's happened is, and I want to be very careful how I say that. And by the way, the lawyer and the spokesperson is a convicted felon. And he's completely unhinged about race. And he's trying to say that this guy is the murderer is the victim because of racism. And he doesn't understand that 5 years after George Floyd, nearly getting into the 5th year, people are had it with reparations, they're had it with tribalism. We've looked at the BLM group of women that stole all the money and bought themselves nice homes and accoutrements. That was a complete fraud. And any black leader who has used the race card, whether it's Latita James, Fannie Willis gave us she gave the nation a tutorial on how black people are different than white people because they have a lot of cash and don't use credit cards. That day that she said that, I was behind an African, one of the nicest people I've ever met, and he had 2 credit cards. He was using it at the food store. I thought, you can't be true. Fannie said you only use cash. And then you have Latita James saying that it's a racist. This is they're going after her because of racism. And then you have Alvin Bragg using the race card. And you put all this together, and people are just tired of racial essentialism. Everybody's tired of them. 26% of black males are tired of it and voted for Donald Trump, 23 to 26. So I guess what I'm saying is that once you set a precedent that because of a particular status, you're exempt from criticism and inquiry and audit, then you're going to you lose deterrence. So and this is what happened in the South when they said, if a Southerner is in a fight with an African American or a dispute under Jim Crow, the Southerner will be believed regardless of the evidence. Kill a mockingbird type thing. And that encouraged that type of behavior of the white person. It encouraged it. He thought that he was going to be exempt. And if you do that to anybody, if you do it, as I said earlier with Jack, if you say to a rich kid, you got into Stanford or you got on Harvard because your dad cut a $10 million check. When he gets to campus, he doesn't think he really has to get A work. He really doesn't think that if he gets in trouble, he's going to call his dad. Any type of exemption like that. So it's a bad thing, but collectively, you can see that Warnock doesn't think that the rules apply to him. Not that everybody does this, but there's a pattern now that when, and you mentioned the Carmelo Anthony lawyer, that when a high profile, the Jussie Smollett case, that they say things that they feel they can say regardless of the truth. These people in these high positions or celebrities or whatever, or people that have become celebrities or nefarious, Trayvon Brown, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, Michael Ford, and they think they're going to get away with it because you don't dare do that. But that era, I think, is over with, and it will be good for everybody. Everybody should be treated the same, and just switch the roles for everybody. Just think about something for a second. You have a all-star African-American twin, and he and his brother are sitting on their side at a track meet watching it. And some white guy comes, gets up, puts a knife into his backpack or his rucksack, deliberately goes over to the side where the two black twins are who are athletes, and then starts talking and cheering the other side or whatever and provokes a fight. Then the white person pulls out a knife and stabs this black twin who dies in his brother's arm in the heart, and then he runs away. What do you think what would be the attitude of the black community, the white community? What would happen? You can understand what would happen. Do you think that person would be let out on $250,000 bail in Texas? What if a white judge then said, well, we usually, for alleged murder, maybe second-degree murder, we usually have $1 million to $2 million bail. But, this kid looks pretty good to me. He's not in trouble, so I'm just going to let him out on $250,000. So if his parents just have to put $225,000 up, you know what? Then he's going to have a GoFundMe. Oh, $400,000. Then his family is going to go rent a house in a gated community for $3,500, where they buy a $400,000 or $500,000. What would be the outcry? And then somebody's going to say, well, Victor, there's a legacy of this. We're 7 generations away from the Civil War. We're 50 years, getting on 60 years from the Civil Rights Movement. So it's time just to forget racial essentialism. It's incidental to who we are. And all of these people keep thinking that they're going to get media and money and they're going to get exemptions. And it's not going to work anymore. It didn't help Senator Menendez, who tried to play the Latino card at once. His wife just got indicted and convicted. Yeah, remember he had all the gold bars and his thing, and he was a complete crook, and he's going to go to jail. I think She's going to obviously, to reduce her sentence, is going to rat him out. But just because he had a Hispanic surname is not going to help him. I think it didn't work, is what I'm saying. Trying to remedy the sins of the past by emulating the sins of the past.
And so it won't work. What do you think they'll charge Anthony with, Carmelo?
I think there'll be some discussion of either voluntary manslaughter because he hit him in the heart, and he had a concealed weapon, or second-degree murder. I would go for second-degree murder. I don't know if there'll be people who will try to say first-degree murder, and by that they'll mean that he planned to take it's a little stretch, but he planned to take the knife. He knowingly took that knife to the other side, knowing that there might be a confrontation, and he wanted a confrontation. He wanted to kill somebody. I don't think that would be a stretch. I would go for second-degree murder.
Would that be, if they could prove that, which I guess they probably would have a hard time, would that be first-degree murder?
Yeah,
Definitely.
if they said that
pre-planned.
if it was premeditated, that when he went over there, it doesn't have to be that he wrote it out in a plan. It just has to be If he knew that when he went to that track meet, he took a knife, and he knew that when he went over there, if he got in trouble, he was going to use that knife, and then he chose to get in trouble, and he chose to use that knife, and he chose to use it in a manner which directed it at the heart. So it was a fatal, a premeditated idea. I'm going to kill that guy. I think a prosecutor might try to plea bargain it down to second degree, 20 years, 30 years in prison. It's Texas, and so it's not California.
All right, Victor, let's go ahead and have a look at some of the comments on your podcasts, in this case, on YouTube. This is on the recent one that you and Jack just published on Tuesday. It says, as far as Mussolini go, oh, wait, sorry, this is on the one that you did, the 1930s fascism. As far as Mussolini goes, he made a mistake in allying himself formally with Hitler. He didn't have to. Hitler would have been satisfied with a benevolent, neutral Italy. Shire writes about this in The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which still would have threatened France and Britain in the Mediterranean. You can argue that Mussolini was succumbing to megalomania as Hitler was, and it clouded his judgment. It's a counterfactual, a what if, but you could make an argument that had Mussolini chosen the same route as Franco, he and his regime would have survived the war intact and perhaps even handed off to a fascist successor. And that's the Baron at inter.net.
Yeah, I think he's right about that.
Do you?
And I wrote something to that effect in the Second World War, if he had played the Swedish or Spanish card or Portuguese card and been neutral. So then the question, because he had, after the fall of France, he had the largest fleet in the Mediterranean. It was larger than the British fleet in the Mediterranean. They didn't have good night vision for night artillery, but he had, I think, six battleships. He had about 60 heavy cruisers, light cruisers. It was a big fleet, and Hitler wanted that fleet to go into, they thought they were going to take Malta, and then they would have the Mediterranean, they'd take Suez. It didn't quite work out that way. So why did he join the war? He joined the war not when Hitler invaded Poland. So the letter writer is correct. He was looking at, he had his finger in the wind. So he said, well, he's in Poland. Everybody said, well, he's going to win. And by the way, he was older by about, I think, 12 or 13 years, and he'd been in power not 10 years longer. So Hitler looked up to him as a model. So then he looked at Poland. He didn't do anything. Then he looked at Norway. He didn't do anything. Then he looked at Denmark, and he didn't do anything. The big decision was France, because he had been an ally of France and Britain in World War I and fought the German-speaking Austrians of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. But when France started to be overrun, he looked at the map of Europe, and he said every single capital is in Nazi hands, all of Europe, everything, or it's neutral. You can go through country by country. The whole thing was in it, and I can carve up. He actually invaded France to carve some border territory. He had to be kind of bailed out by Hitler. And then he looked at the Mediterranean, and he thought, Britain's going to fall because it's all alone. The United States is not going to come in. The Soviet Union is on the side of Hitler. So what's going to happen, say from late May, well, they invaded on May 10th, but it fell in 27 days, France. By the 20th day, they knew it. I think that's when he was being courted also by the British, who wanted to use him to talk to Hitler to see if they could stop Hitler. This was not Churchill. Churchill said, Halifax, if you want to go do it, do it. It won't work. But there were clandestine negotiations via Mussolini to see if they could make some deal. And Hitler supposedly said, well, you can keep the British. Anyway, the point I'm making is he looked at the Mediterranean. He said that we're trapped by the jaws of Suez and Gibraltar. We can't get out. So he went to Hitler and said, I will supply the fleet. I want to carve off some France, and then I am going to invade Egypt, because he had won East Africa, Somalia, and then he had lost it to the British. But he said, I'm going to invade the British, and they're not going to be supplied U-boats. And he miscalculated. The British not only supplied their forces in Egypt, they routed the Italians, and then Rommel had to intervene to save them, and then it was downhill from there. He just bet on the wrong horse. Had he waited to make that decision from May, June 1940, had he waited as early as January of 41 or 41, he could have seen that Britain was not going to fall. They didn't have a navy to take the island. They didn't have the Luftwaffe couldn't bomb it, and then he could have stayed neutral.
I have some other ones here, nice, and advice for you. This one's nice. It's by Anonymous. I greatly enjoy your talks. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, experience, and wisdom with us. I am praying that you will recover from your illness soon and have a lovely and peaceful remainder of your life. I just finished watching this program, Real Fascism of the 1930s, and feel at peace knowing that God is in control and that he has given you to us to explain what's happening in this day and age. That was very sweet, Anonymous.
I had the flu for 2 weeks. I got on a plane. I got a sinus infection. I thought it would go away for a month, and then I took an antibiotic. It didn't do it, and then I got worse and worse. And I'm on another antibiotic, and I hope I can avoid, I guess, a fourth operation. I'm counting those little stents I've had, plus a major operation in my sinuses. But that's very nice.
Yeah.
I'm not a gift from God, believe me. If you read my email, it might be a gift from the underworld.
Well, since you're talking about sinuses, I have some, these are all very short, but advice on sinuses. Ruth Simon says, please try acupuncture for your sinuses.
I did.
Very good, Ruth. Yep. He's right there with you. And Angelo Carrillo says, Mr. Hanson, Carrillo. Mr. VDH, and then she says, try 1 ounce of tequila, 1 teaspoon of honey, and 1 ounce of lemon every 6 hours. And Daniel Berry says, try baby shampoo.
I've done that
2 teaspoons and 4 cups of water, and rinse your sinuses with this.
I do the neti. My problem was that once you have your turbinates cut, your septum straightened, your polyps removed, and most importantly, your maxillary tunnel passages enlarged from basically 1 millimeter to 10. You don't have any cilia hairs left that move the mucus. And I was told by a wonderful surgeon in Palo Alto. I can name him. His name is Hester. He's a great guy. And he said, you're going to have to do a neti pot in the morning and in the night to move that because you have an allergic condition, an immune problem. So I didn't do it. I was feeling great. And I'd had maybe 30 sinus infections my earlier life. I had stents put in, everything. I'd taken Levaquin. I hated that. I'd taken Augmentin. I hated that. I got allergic to those. So I didn't want to do it. But then this thing came along, and I should have been doing the neti pot. I didn't, and the flu, I got on a plane, and the elevation, and I came home with the thing, and I thought, I tried nose sprays, I tried oregano, I tried, you name it, I tried it. Steam.
There was another advice to use your oregano, yeah.
Yes, I used oregano, I used the sprays, I did the neti pot, and I did the gorillacillin for 8 days of doxycyllin. It made me sick as a dog, and now I'm on a Z-Pack. And I'm hoping that this will do the trick. I have to fly in 2 days. I'm stopping all flying after June 1st. I have 3 big flights, and then I can't. I'm 71. I said to myself, no mas. Roberto Duran, I give up. No mas. And I really appreciate that. But I think this will work. And steam is very valuable. Get a little steamer, inhale, get a little rinse, then wash it out. And if it doesn't work, the surgeon, who's a wonderful person, will do kind of a modified enlargement. And I don't want to do that. That was kind of a medieval. In his hands, he reduced the normal surgery, 4 surgeries in once. He probably went from 3 or 4 hours down to less than an hour. He was an expert at it. And my son has the same problem, and I wish that he would get it addressed.
Well, Victor, thank you for everything today. And thanks to our audience for choosing to join us today. Try to catch Victor on YouTube or Rumble. He's on both. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you. One last thing, you mentioned all these suggestions. I went to my, as I said, the first dermatologist I ever had, and they asked, how many operations have you had? And I didn't realize I've had 8. And I was feeling very old and decrepit, right? But he said 8. And then I mentioned, he wanted to know, and I told them each one. He looked at me like I was insane. You know what I mean? Like, how could you get a ruptured appendix in Libya? How could you get a torn ureter in Greece? How could your bike fall apart? How could you get 3 kidneys? You know, he didn't say that, but that was the expression. He was a wonderful dermatologist.
He was
We have so
talking
many,
to a very accident-prone person.
reckless, reckless in my youth, and even reckless. All of the operations and all the malaria and all that stuff was preventable had I just been sober and judicious. So I blame myself. Don't get on a plane when you have a dull ache below your navel and say, well, it's not on the right side yet. It moves to the right side right before it bursts. Especially don't get on a plane to Libya.
Okay. Thank you, Victor Davis Hanson. And this is Sami Winc and Victor Davis Hanson, and we're signing off.
Thank you very much for listening and watching.